More WAMC news coming up next hour.
Well, next hour.
Indeed.
You'll be back?
I don't know. I'm feeling a little scratchy here.
Is that fun drive or is that smoke?
Yes. Yeah, the wildfires.
Yeah, I think a little bit of both,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
It's over, right? The drive is done.
The drive is over. Yeah, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you to our listeners who made the fun drive. Who made the fun drive?
Indeed.
I can end there. And then who made it end yesterday morning is even better.
It was great. Yeah.
And it was great working with you. I had a lot of fun. It was really, really fun. And we had a good time. So we got done. We wanted to get done by 9 o'clock so we could have a full show. We got done by 9 o'clock. We had a full show.
And by the way, how tired were you during that show?
Oh, I wasn't bad during the show. But then I caught a train. I left here and I went down to New York. Because I wanted to go to the Tribeca Film Festival to see John Mellencamp interviewed by my hero David Letterman, and it was great. It was down in the Village, and it was fantastic, and it was an amazing event, and everything went really, really well. My train was at 9 o'clock coming back. I got done about 7:15, so I think, I know what I'll do. I'll go take a walk down through the Battery. And come around. And do you know what's right near the Battery besides the Statue of Liberty?
Nope.
And the Staten Island Ferry?
No.
There's a great Irish bar called the Dead Rabbit.
Oh, no.
Okay. Now, so...
This does not end well, does it?
No, but probably not for the reason you're expecting it to end well.
All right.
So I go to the Dead Rabbit, and not surprisingly, I've been to the Dead Rabbit before. But the Dead Rabbit has more Irish whiskey available than any other bar in the world. Any other bar in the world. And so I collect Irish whiskey with my buddy Bill, and we have a good time. We don't, we just don't imbibe. We take a little sip, and then that's it. That's
right.
It's very scientific.
I see. Thank you, doctor. Okay, good.
So I go in, and my eyes immediately launch to a bottle. Which is, and I'm probably messing this up, but it's called their Gaelic, and it is a Middleton product, which is out of Jameson. And what they do is they take these very old trees that have to come down, and then they make barrels out of those trees, and then they, for however many 20 years, they will take the 21 years that the whiskey will be aged in those barrels.
Yeah.
And my eyes, like I have found the golden orb. This is the greatest thing in the world. So I said to the woman, I said, could I see the bottle? I see the bottle, and it's great. So she pours me a bottle.
Right.
Not a bottle. She pours me a shot.
That sounds about
not an entire bottle.
Speed, yeah.
No, she pours me a shot. So I have this lovely glass, and I'm in this bar, and I'm overlooking, the Battery, and it's great. And I've had a great day, and we've ended the fun drive, and I just saw my hero David Letterman, and it's a great day. It's absolutely fantastic. Well, with that, my alarm goes off on my watch to tell me that my train does not leave at 9:05 as I expected. It leaves at 8:25.
Oh, mercy.
Okay. So now basically I have to chug.
A very expensive,
very high test whiskey.
That's a waste.
Yeah. Well, it was a waste, but so.
Okay.
But you do it, right? So I go out, I pound it, and then I walk outside, and as if I were in an episode of Sex and the City, there's a cab waiting for me. Yeah. So I go in, I get in the cab, and I said, "Penn Station, please," and off we go to Penn Station. Okay. Now, two things happen in the cab. One, about halfway through, I become very nauseous.
Oh boy, that's not good.
And I'm like, and then you don't want to throw up in the cab because I know they charge you a lot for that. And then also, you don't want to throw up. But yeah, you can put everybody's mic on. You don't want to throw up. And so I'm trying to keep my mind off of it, and I've got the windows down, and I've got the air blasting on me, and I'm trying to just try to work through it. So then I'm like, oh my God. And then for some reason I think, I wonder what I paid for that.
Oh my gosh.
So I take the receipt out of my pocket that is wrapped around my credit card, and I think, well, it's top shelf, and $30-$40 would be my guess. It's expensive, but it's a treat.
Yeah.
It's lovely. You want to take a guess?
140.
Oh, wow, you're good.
Really?
$148.50.
Okay. You could almost buy a tree for that.
You could buy the whole damn forest, Ray. $148.50 plus 20% gratuity.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
Yeah. So now this doesn't help the nausea any. And then I think to myself, holy crap, I just spent almost $200 on a drink that I'm about to vomit up.
Oh my gosh.
So,
oh gosh. So we've covered alcoholism and nausea so far on the roundtable.
Yeah,
it's going to be a good.
Yeah,
show.
no, it's good.
Yeah.
And so, but I think I then became so stunned and shocked by the amount of money that I spent that my entire system just shut down.
Oh my heavens.
And then I felt fine.
Good. Oh, good.
Yeah.
So it is actually a happy ending to the story.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, now the DA shows up. But it was a good day.
Man. But you made it home. You got a show.
I wish you were with me. That would have been fun.
I don't drink
I know you're a
whiskey
bourbon guy, but
from trees. I mean,
well, it's not from a tree.
Some leprechaun was probably living in the thing, right?
We don't know what the leprechaun was doing in there.
Well, enjoy.
Ray, have a beautiful weekend.
Yeah, man.
We'll
thanks for
a
great job yesterday, and thanks to everybody who pitched and pledged and everything else.
We appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. We'll be back for the official intro to the show right after this. Well, good morning. Welcome to the Roundtable and to our panel discussion this morning. Very nice to have you with us on this Friday morning, and just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and very glad to be here. We have a fantastic panel, and I think we have a lot to talk about. There's a little news today. It's funny. I was talking to my brother actually when I was traveling down to New York yesterday. I was talking to my brother in North Carolina, and he said, "What do you think? Friday? It'll probably be announced Friday." And I said, "Yeah, it'll probably be Friday in the afternoon, and then we won't get to discuss it till Monday." And then lo and behold, about 2 hours later, it was announced. So here we are, and I'm thrilled I get to talk about this issue with such a great group and important people, a great group of experts. So President Trump indicted, charged, and this is serious. It's the Justice Department charging the former president in the documents case. The indictment handed up by a grand jury in Miami is the first time a former U.S. president has faced federal charges. We have an amazing group. Let me introduce them to you, and then we'll jump right in with the item of the day. Public policy and communications expert Theresa Bourgeois is here. Good morning, Theresa. How are you?
Good morning. I'm terrific, and congratulations to you and Ray and Sarah and the whole gang for an amazing fund drive. It really is an affirmation of the great work that you do. It's awesome, and thanks to all the listeners. Yeah, incredible.
We had a really great time, and I know it seemed like a lot of days, but we were doing it 2 hours, 3 hours a day, and when you put all that together, it's just really not that much time. And the fact that we made that much money in that little of a time, as far as hour-wise, is really amazing, and it just speaks volumes to how wonderful this audience is and how giving and caring they are.
And also, you helped the food pantries, which I'd been paying attention to the real crisis they're in, and it's fantastic what you did for them too. That's just fabulous.
They're a great organization, and we're thrilled to be a part of it, and of course honoring Alan and hearing all the beautiful comments that people had to say about his time and here, and to wish him well in his retirement was very nice.
It's got to make him feel really good about that he's handed over, and that it really is a testament to what he's created and the legacy that he's created, and that it's there's so much support.
I hope he feels that way.
Yeah. Well, I already do.
Yeah.
Obviously, the listeners feel that.
They certainly do. Jim Hendler, Tetherless World Chair of Computer, Web, and Cognitive Sciences and founding director of the Future of Computing Institute at RPI. Jim, good morning. How are you?
I'm good, Joe. It was really nice. I managed to be away for a few days, so I missed the end of the telethon and the air quality. So as one of my close relatives, in fact, my spouse put it, I missed the bad air and the bad air.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm. Where were you that you missed out on the?
Well, I was actually out at a campus thing in Gloucester, Mass, but I did listen.
Okay,
on
but
my phone.
But the air was okay there.
But you didn't get the.
We had. Yeah, we were right on Cape Ann, so we had the beautiful air.
Well, that's beautiful.
It's man, I love that.
Gloucester. It's true.
Thank you.
I love Cape.
Thank you, Mr.
Well, I didn't say Gloucester.
Mr. District Attorney.
Gloucester.
Albany County District Attorney David Soares is with us. Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm here to clear the air, so to speak.
Yeah.
The smoke is not from Canada, as many have been led to believe. The smoke is coming from the state capitol. Yes. Yes.
What, have they elected a pope or what happened?
Oh, no. It's just a lot of smoke coming out.
Oh, I got you. All right. Well, boy, I just want to talk about that now. Siena College Professor of Economics, Aaron Pacitti. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Congrats on the fund drive.
Thank you very
congrats
much.
on making it back from New York City. I mean, I think that's the real story here.
You pour me into a train, I'll be fine.
Escape from New York.
Yeah, escape from New York. It was.
Did you even breathe down there? My goodness.
Oh, it wasn't bad. I thought it was worse here than it was in Manhattan yesterday. But anyway, okay. So the justice.
What is an untethered chair? Sounds like the name of your band. But that's an actual.
I want you to know that the technical name is the Tetherless World, and we could get into that. But recently, I was interviewed about TikTok on something that got picked up in like 100 newspapers around the world and things like that, and they referred to me as the untethered chair, and I was sitting there going like, I'm so glad Alan isn't going to be here today.
Untethered.
Constantly made fun of tethered, untethered.
The unhinged chair.
So in honor of Alan, I just want to say, no tetherball jokes.
No.
I hope he's vacationing on Fire Island or something fun.
So he didn't answer your question, I'll note, David. But, the Justice Department on Thursday took the legally and politically momentous step of lodging federal criminal charges against former President Donald Trump, accusing him of mishandling classified documents he kept upon leaving office and then obstructing the government's efforts to reclaim them. This from the New York Times. Mr. Trump confirmed on his social media platform that he had been indicted. The charges against him include willfully retaining national defense secrets in violation of the Espionage Act, making false statements in a conspiracy to obstruct justice, according to two people familiar with the matter. The Justice Department made no comment on the indictment Thursday and did not immediately make the document public. The former president is expected to appear in Miami in a federal district court at 3 p.m. on Tuesday. We do not know if between now and then we will learn more from the actual indictment of what it says. But just the 3 paragraphs I read should be enough to get us started here. David, what should we be thinking of?
Well, if you want to get a preview as to what the sealed indictment is going to look like, I would recommend to everyone to read the Washington Post coverage of this specific story, but more specifically within the story to go into the timeline of events that took place between the NARA,
the National Archives, and every single correspondence with National Archives and Records Administration.
Yes, sir.
Starting 2021.
Starting 2021. Go into and read every correspondence between NARA and representatives of the Trump administration, as well as Trump as a private citizen, who also had representatives engaging with NARA on his behalf. If you read every single correspondence between those parties, you will start to flesh out what this indictment and what these indictments are going to look at. In addition to you understanding the theory of the Department of Justice's case, you will also get a preview as to who the witness is that they will intend to call to establish their case beyond a reasonable doubt. The other thing to bear in mind for your listeners is to understand that this specific case is one slice of a much larger pie, and what the special prosecutor has done in this instance is they have taken the most clean and what I believe the easiest of all of the crimes that Mr. Trump has committed and proceeded along those lines. This is one of those cases where I know that people have questions about whether it should be tried in Washington State, Washington, D.C., or whether there's a comfort level in trying this case in Miami, and we understand the politics of those communities and the possible jury pool. This is one of those instances where the facts of this case and these indictments are so clean that it doesn't matter where you try it. You can try it, in Pluto, which I understand is no longer a planet. But even if you tried it there, I think you're going to be successful in obtaining a conviction.
Successful.
Yes.
And that speaks to the strength of the case.
It speaks to the strength of the case. It speaks to, first of all, the elements of what the Department of Justice will have to establish, right? That, for example, that the withholding was willful, that he intended to actually hold on to these materials, and that he conspired to prevent them from also finding, these materials, right? There is evidence abound that was in fact the case. And who's going to tell us that? Who's going to let us know that? It's going to be the very people that Donald Trump hired. There's not going to be one witness in this case that is aligned with the Democratic establishment, that's aligned with the current, Department of Justice. Every single person who will lend their voice and lend evidence to securing a conviction in this case will be coming from the Trump administration, whether it's Pat Cipollone, who's the former counsel to the White House, or Mr. Cochran, who at one time represented Donald Trump in these proceedings.
As I was sobering up in the train yesterday, I was thinking to myself,
you got off at the right stop?
Yeah, it's the end of the line. It made it easier. I was thinking, Theresa, about it just this is also extraordinary, and it's nothing that we've heard of before. But we have a former president of the United States facing federal charges, we believe, of espionage.
Espionage, right.
I mean, I know it's just one of 7, but espionage.
Right, which is stunning. I watched Fox News last night purposefully, just to. Well, I guess I went back and forth, but I watched a good 2 hours of.
So you, the home listener, don't have to.
So don't have to. And it's fascinating and troubling to me what incredible divide is, and I think this is just going to be such an incredible stress test on our democracy, because you have. I mean, it seems like, I wonder is Trump running for president part of his legal strategy, right? Because it affords him all sorts of protections that he might not have otherwise.
I think he's gotten all the protection that he's going to have, because the moment he announced the Department of Justice announced the special prosecutor. There's only one reason we have a special prosecutor, and that's because he made himself a candidate. And the appearance of impropriety of a Justice Department led by, President Biden conducting an investigation and what now is a declared opponent prompted the Department of Justice to appoint a special prosecutor. I agree with you. You know, this man has tested the sturdiness of our democratic principles and values
and structure.
Right. He's created an entire environment and culture of people who no longer have faith in institutions that I believe without him as a person in our history would never have arrived at. Right. There might have been little kernels of doubt, but I think he made it okay to just publicly doubt that. But I will say, and again, I don't think I'm wrong on this. This is not one of those cases where there's anything in question. Did you have these materials?
Right. But the messaging, and they really had some comprehensive messaging ready. And the messaging was, you're criminalizing what in fact is a basic records case. This is a records case. A lot of people inadvertently mishandle these records. This is a records case, and they've criminalized it. And then the bigger message is that Joe Biden is trying to weaponize the Justice Department to take out his opponent because he can't beat him fair and square. That is a deeply troubling problem on our democracy, and in fact, there's so many layers removed, so that's not happening. And in fact, just the opposite. When Trump was president, unlike prior presidents, he misused the justice or tried to misuse the Justice Department. But this saying over and over again, the Justice Department can't be trusted, the CIA can't be trusted, the IRS can't be trusted, none of these institutions, the judges, the courts, nothing can be trusted. It's this whole thing is putting an incredible strain on our process.
That's part of the Republicans'
strategy.
That's the strategy, is to just
but it's dangerous for democracy.
Chisel away at the legitimacy of institutions, whether that is just in terms of marshaling public opinion or actually weakening them in terms of like defunding the IRS, for example. To me, this is the nicest gift basket Trump could be given.
Right.
Because he runs on the politics of grievance. Right. He has no new policy ideas. His policy ideas were remarkable failures. The more opposition Trump faces from lawmakers, from Democratic politicians, no matter how serious the indictment is, and no matter how confident prosecutors are in getting a conviction, this is going to benefit Trump. He's going to be able to say, "Look, they're after me."
Unless I'm interrupting you.
No, that's mainly the point. But like when you run on the politics of grievance, the more people that tell you you're doing something wrong, the more power that gives him in terms of fundraising, in terms of marshaling support of his base. And I know there's critiques of like, well, enough lawsuits are going to start chiseling away his energy. Enough lawsuits are going to give voters fatigue about hearing all the bad stuff he's done. Listen, it's 2023. This has been going on since 2016. Like, all he does is get stronger and raise more money.
The question is, I think, what are the Republicans going to do? Because so far, they've just stayed silent or in a range of ways, either by making statements or by staying silent. They've enabled this behavior for years, right? But as Joe says, Espionage Act, right?
Yes.
So at what point are some of them going to say enough is enough, that this goes beyond? And I don't know that they will now, but I do think, you're going to have Chris Christie, who's very clear. I mean, obviously Pence just punted on this one the other day. It was just disgusting the way he was, rule of law, except for this.
My apologies for interrupting you, but most of the Republicans who have spoken in the last 24 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours, have all said, damn that Joe Biden and his Justice Department.
Right, weaponizing. This is not America. Now, I looked just before I came on. I hadn't seen it last night or this morning, but McConnell, I hadn't seen any statement from him yet. Has he said something yet?
Not that I'm more of.
I've been checking and I haven't seen anything. I've been looking for some key people. Thune, McConnell, some of the leadership that I think in the The cloakroom, if they're talking honestly, they don't want him around anymore, right? But is this the evidence here so strong? I mean, how can you defend the misuse of these documents that other people are jailed for years?
How
right?
can you defend the behavior of sexual predators, which they've done?
Right.
Over and over.
Yeah,
and over
this is
again.
not new.
Right,
And all
right.
it does is strengthen his base.
Jim, let's get to you, and then I got to take a break.
I was just going to say, I was flipping channels last night, so I'm not sure which one I picked this up on, but somebody made the point that the name of this case is going to be United States of America versus Donald J. Trump.
Right.
And that to me just kind of sums up what you're saying, Theresa. That's kind of where we are. It's not so much Republican, Democrat. It's really what our country has always stood for versus what Trump is trying to make it. And it's going to be really interesting how that plays out. Frankly, I think, I know how serious these charges are. I think most people in America don't realize that obstruction and espionage and things like that this isn't the same as the fact that Pence had some in his garage or Biden had some in his office. It's the willfulness of it that makes it legal. But, that's a subtle thing when you're just looking at the names of the charges.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue. We welcome your letters as well. Panel at WAMC.org, panel at WAMC.org. We have a terrific group with us this morning: Theresa Bourgeois, Jim Hendler, Aaron Pacitti, and David Soares. We welcome you, panel at WAMC.org. We'll be right back. Good morning. Welcome back to the Roundtable and to our panel discussion. This morning we are talking about the Trump indictment, which came down yesterday. Still a lot we don't know, actually. We haven't, none of it's been officially unsealed. We don't know when that will happen, although we do know he has a court appearance on Tuesday in Miami in federal court. We have a letter from Sam who this couldn't have come at a better time, as far as it's as if I asked him to write it. How are the documents found with Trump different than what was found with Pence and Biden? Now, this is the Trump argument, and it is also one that was addressed ad nauseum on all of the news programs last night, and I'll defer to any member of the panel who wants this, but my understanding is that having the documents and having NARA come to you and say, you have this, 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 and this, and you say, oh, okay, well, here that is different than, no, I don't have it, and then they do a search warrant on your house, and then they find it, and then they ask for more stuff, and then you lie about it.
Yeah,
Isn't that the difference?
Yeah, there's a reason why up to now there are 4 public theories, right, that have been made public, but by people in the know. It's the willful retention of national secrets, which is the only.
So in English, that means
it's having top secret, like top secret information about, the examples that have been public, although there's no way to confirm this until we actually have perhaps a trial or discovery, if this case makes it there. But publicly, what's been out there is nuclear secrets from the Iranians. We've got
Iran's missile program.
The Iran's missile program.
U.S. intelligence gathering efforts in China.
Yes. So those are very, very significant materials to have.
The highest.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
clearance.
This is the stuff that, if you're watching a movie, it's 14 levels down, under the ground, where this
Only
information.
See in a skiff.
Yeah. Where this information is maintained. And not the materials that were retrieved from both Pence and Joe Biden. But I think what's in the court of public opinion, of course, Donald Trump and his team are spending a ton of money in earned media, right? And spending a ton of money in publications and obtaining earned media, attempting to sway the opinion of the court of public opinion. And if you're doing that, then that's what you do. Biden did it. He did it when he was a senator. He did it when and Mike Pence. Mike Pence did it. He did it when he was vice president, so on and so forth. But when you get to discovery and when you get to the trial and you actually see what it is that this person attempted to and conspired to deprive the government of retrieving, that's going to make people go, oh.
Yeah, but I think
let's go to Jim real quick.
Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately, David, I think most of that stuff will only be released at that kind of headline level publicly. So I've held high clearances. I've been involved. I've been involved more on the nuclear side and the cyber side than some of this other stuff. But some of these documents, we're talking about things. Of the ones we've talked about, the one that really gets me is some of the things about our intelligence gathering. The one thing that you need higher and higher and higher and higher clearances to get access to is what are called sources and methods, how we know what other people are doing. Because the minute they know that, if it's human, we get rid of the human. And literally people have been killed over this stuff. And if it's sources, then you start learning how to counter those sources.
Do you notice how he didn't even blink when he said we get rid of the human?
Yeah.
I was never there.
He is untethered.
You cut the tether, yeah.
No, I don't mean we.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so if...
Well, the person who just died in jail in the last week, right?
Some of these people who have released information to enemies of the United States have allowed those enemies to kill CIA agents and others, right? Even more importantly, kill their own people or do something to their own people who have become our sources. And, of course, it goes in all these directions, things like that. And we could get into the whole issues of why it's important or not. But we're really talking about stuff that has real-world impact. Now, some of what's made the news, the plans for what we would do in the Taiwan Straits or things like that. A lot of that is the military does a huge amount of planning. So some of this is wargaming. It's just to see, do we have the right kind of forces if this thing were to happen? Some of it is very specific, right? Which aircraft carrier would we put where if we were doing this? But those kind of things are done against hypotheticals, right? So there's a shelf full of this stuff and says, if the president were to ask tomorrow for us to do this, we can't start thinking about it now. We have to have started thinking about it 3 years ago. So they have a stack of that. And some of what Trump was waving around were those plans. And those are scary. But the ones that really get me and the ones that really go for the Espionage Act, those are the ones that reveal sources and methods. And those are the things that significantly impact our national security.
I think this begs a question, though, and that is, what's the motive behind keeping those documents? And I think, and I don't know how this plays out legally, but I've come up with why does Trump want to keep these, right? Why is he holding them so close? And I don't think it's because he's afraid of getting prosecuted, because, like I said, that works to his advantage. I think he might have held on to these as, leverage for, other countries that might have damning information on him, like the Steele dossier. 2, he might use them to essentially sell to hostile foreign powers to help him get elected in 2024. Or 3, and this is the less evil interpretation, is that they're just souvenirs. Trophies for, the investment bankers that paid $20,000 to go hunting in the, kill lions and bring them back, and it's like, oh, it's not really hunting, but whatever.
See him when he goes
you did
to
leave
Mar-a-Lago.
No, but I was going to say, there's a motive here, and I think, and I don't know if that matters legally, but there's clearly, he's got some intent with these.
He does, and
it wasn't just like, oh, I should just take these with me.
I believe that specifically this issue has been bifurcated, right? I believe that we have the Department of Justice that are dealing specifically with, you have this, and you said you didn't have it.
Right.
You conspired with others to keep us from getting it, and we're going to deal with that right now. I think the bigger question, the one that you're asking, is, well, why did you want to keep these, especially after you've communicated with us now on 3 separate occasions that we've gotten back everything that you took.
Right.
And by the way, we also have on video, which is the best part. It's like the 2 dudes that are, it's like, hey, you get the subpoena on Sunday, and it's like Monday morning you get 2 people walking into the location at Mar-a-Lago where these boxes are, removing things and putting things back, right? So you definitely, through overt acts, you're demonstrating, your efforts to conceal this material and prevent us from retaining it. But you do have agencies, right? Because you have intelligence agencies that have files and have, sources that understand that this president was attempting to, engage in certain commercial ventures, beyond our borders with some of these countries. Now, did he actually maintain materials that were somehow favorable to those countries that he can then, engage in negotiations with those countries? Jared made a ton of money, from the Saudis, right? A person who actually, when the presidency began, was in trouble with some of his properties, and when the presidency ended, the man was flush with cash. But I believe that you have those apparatuses within our government that are very interested in this and looking at this. Now, as far as the trial is concerned, the witnesses that are going to be used by the Department of Justice is Pat Cipollone. Pat Cipollone, who is the White House counsel, was the first person to say, hey, look, I know that the whole January 6th thing didn't work out for you, but, you got 14 days to get out, off the premises. You need to return all of these materials, right? And the other thing that I will say is this. Whenever you have an allegation that someone has somehow exploited either a company or an institution, yes, the burden is on the people to prove that it's the individual who intentionally did it, but there's like a shadow burden as well. And that shadow burden is you have to also demonstrate that the institution was applying and had, rigid processes in place, and it wasn't, and this person just didn't stumble in to an act that exploited the institution. Right.
And they have witnesses that say that they explained the process over and over again to him. But And because you can't say, well, he just didn't understand what the classification system, because they clearly have people that's gone over. But I'd like to get back to the listener's question about, well, what's the difference between what Biden did and what Pence did and what Trump did? And I think the difference, and I'm not a lawyer, so you can tell me the legal terms here, but with Pence and Biden, it was inadvertent retention in the sense that offices get packed up, files get packed up, not by the president, right? And they end up having documents in their files that they didn't even know they had. So when you start going through the boxes to double check, okay, might I have anything? They find stuff. And so they go through it on their own, find stuff, and then the archives folks come in and they find stuff, but they didn't intentionally hold it. Whereas with Trump, the records retention people started in 2021 when they realized, first of all, before him leaving, they said, you need to give us all this stuff. And then when it became clear that there were some key documents that historically that they were looking for that they knew that should be there that weren't there, so they started asking in 2021. I started asking politely, started working with them. And then they subpoenaed him, right? And then they, as you said, then they signed a letter saying, we've given you everything. And then they found 100 more. So it's the difference between just inadvertently having them in the boxes of your files versus, which is Biden and Pence. Pence has been cleared. Biden hasn't been cleared yet, but by all accounts, it's Biden's inadvertent, versus Trump, where he's actively withholding these. And he said publicly, I had a right to keep them in the CNN town meeting. He said publicly.
I had the right to keep them, and not only did I have the right to keep them, I had the right to declassify them.
In my mind.
In my mind. And then
but he does not have that right.
But then on tape, and there are tapes floating around where he is saying this is information that was not declassified, and it remained classified, and he had it for specific reasons. Yeah. And so that's going to play into this as well.
The alarm bells that went off was not, because you're right. The difference between every other person who's had either a document here or a document there is that once they became aware of it or once it was brought to their attention, there was the immediate cooperation. There's Joe Biden saying, hey, come into the garage. Here's my Corvette. And you know what I mean? And go through everything. Here's my office. Go through everything.
That was bizarre.
The same thing with Pence, right? The same thing with Pence. The difference here is I ask you for the material. You ignore me. I ask for the material again, and you play coy. Now we have to subpoena you. When I subpoena you, you have images in the shadows, moving materials. Then when you send the 15 boxes, you send 15 boxes that's all disorganized, and you have some materials that are there that are just letters from President Obama, Kim Jong-un, but then you have all of this like confidential materials that are all sprinkled in there, right? So the first time classified, but the first time that the Department of Justice gets involved, they're not engaging here as though someone, as though materials were missing. They were engaging based upon the fact that what they had in front of them was evidence that material had been mishandled. So there's a difference between mishandling and missing. So they're engaging in this and not arriving at this ultimate conclusion that he's taken documents. It's like, no, there's evidence here that there's stuff that's all disheveled, not in place. You still have more materials in Mar-a-Lago. We need to look at them to make sure that those are also not being mishandled. And so you went from a mishandling material to a conspiracy, an obstruction. So there's an evolution of behavior here that makes it, when they say that the cover-up is worse than the crime, you just start to see cover-up, even worse cover-ups. And I might add this. The most extraordinary thing that's happened in 2 years, all throughout these investigations, is the Department of Justice being able to permeate the attorney-client privilege.
Right, that's incredible.
And obtain testimony from Donald Trump's lawyers.
But again,
that is amazing.
And it was Republican judges who said that was doable. In other words, this was not a case of judge shopping and finding some liberal who would say, yeah, you can breach attorney. The people who made the decisions, the judges, were not liberal judges. They were judges who looked at the evidence and said, it's so overwhelming that and
explain
that
that
has a crime.
The attorneys had to
potential.
testify, right?
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to breach that privilege, there needs to be a lot of evidence, and it couldn't have been political, because if it had been political, these weren't the judges who would have.
But if you were watching Fox News last night, and if you're looking at these conservative Republican talking points, that is a key part of, a different standard for Trump than anybody else, that if the Democrats had done this.
Take us through our final minute.
The irony here is how he got elected in 2016 with the Hillary Clinton emails about that, the sanctity of classified information, how it needs to be protected. But, this is a person who obviously doesn't understand, irony. But so in terms of making the lawyers have to testify, is this a slam dunk for the prosecutors? Like, that seems to be exceptional. What are the ramifications of that, David?
Absolutely. The thing that people... Like, again, if you go through and you read the timeline and you just go paragraph by paragraph, month by month, pay attention to who is being engaged. Because the president's chief of staff was also being engaged. So we're not talking about, the chauffeur's cousin who happened to be in the front seat that day that overheard something. We're talking about the people who are actually having conversations with the president. And this president's reflexive, declaration of privilege has now been pierced at the highest level. And there's also, we're not going to get a list of who went into the grand jury and testified, but again, for a special prosecutor to feel that, hey, I'm okay with going to Miami. Mm-hmm. We could try this in Miami. As a matter of fact, let's look for a county that was 95% red and voted for this. Let's try it there. That it speaks to the confidence in the evidence, and it speaks to the people who are going to tell the America's story about this, the Department of Justice's story.
We have a lot of letters, and we will get to those. We welcome yours, panel at WAMC.org. I'm pretty sure our panelists have a lot more to say on this issue as well. We'll get to all of it in just a moment. First, news with Ray Graff. Good morning. Welcome back to the Roundtable and to our panel discussion. This morning we are talking about the indictment of President Donald John Trump, which occurred yesterday and facing multiple felonies in a new indictment. The indictment, and David, I'll ask you, we have so many letters from listeners, so I want to get to those, but a sealed indictment will be unsealed?
It will be unsealed on Tuesday.
At 3 o'clock.
At 3, and what we can hope, again, I would challenge our listeners to read that very specific timeline that's in the Washington Post article today to see if the language that's in the indictment, if it's a speaking indictment, which I'm hoping it is, and I'm imagining it would be.
Explain what that is.
A speaking indictment is where a prosecutor will include a lot more information in a narrative to give people an understanding of how they arrived and what at the charge and what the the exact acts. And it's not just hey, we've charged you with this and these are the elements of the crime and we suspect that you've done this. A speaking document is just going to contain a lot of information. We're hoping that that's the case once it's unsealed.
Because they can't go out and do interviews.
Because they will not be able to speak, and the only opportunity that you as a prosecutor will have, like for example, when you have rallies and protests outside of my office and they're saying, hey, this defendant has a mental health issue. And you're like, okay, well, you haven't submitted any mental health. You haven't submitted that as a defense, a possible defense. You haven't provided any documentations to the court. You're just saying it. And the next thing you know, people are saying, well, how can you prosecute that person who has a mental health issue? The only time that we get to speak back is whenever we are, in fact, providing a document to the court where we can attempt to address those issues and take those opportunities. My hope is that the DOJ is, in fact, doing that. This specific special prosecutor seems to be a few steps ahead in understanding that there's not only what's happening in the courtroom, but there's also a very important court of public opinion issue here, and I think that that's what we'll get on Tuesday.
I promise I'll get to the letters, I promise. But I just want a little bon mot that came yesterday, which was there was was it Ruth Marcus, who is a opinion writer for the Washington Post, and in her column she was saying that the line was that Elise Stefanik, who had come out saying that the Department of Justice was operating under the thumb of President Biden, and that he had weaponized the Justice Department to take out his political enemies. But the line that she used was, Elise Stefanik, who used to know better. And I thought, wow, that's a great point. That's a really interesting point. All right, let's go to the letters. We have a ton, and we welcome yours. Panel at WAMC.org. Panel at WAMC.org. Can't help but suspect the indictment is just another Trump promotional stunt to keep his name in the media and stoke his supporters. Well, we discussed that, right? I mean, that's part of this. He expected, it's a strategy.
They're going to raise a lot of money off of it.
Denise, Trump took the documents because he is a child and took his toys and he went home when he realized he could not stay in the White House. Just another temper tantrum. Maybe an oversimplification, but there's certainly something to it, I think. When he's convicted and when he refuses to come for sentencing, writes R, calls his redneck base to come and surround Mar-a-Lago, then what will we do? This is how civil wars begin.
Well, I do think there is some concern, and especially listening to Fox last night, about this sort of call to action. We have to save Trump. We have to be on his side. And one of the things that a couple of people were saying is that, the Democrats are all focusing on January 6th, but the real insurrection is June 8th. This is an insurrection. This is so now they're like, that's their rallying call, and that's dangerous.
Kerry writes, people who love Trump will love him even more because of this. It's the independent voters who will be concerned that if Trump gets back into office, he will engage in espionage again. I think that concern will trump, quotations, any concern about Biden's age. Does anybody think about that?
I think that each of the separate things against Trump will have a few people changing, and some of them a lot. The sex charges in some ways will probably hurt him more with independents than the espionage charges will. But I think if it is a speaking indictment, or if it does come out in court that this has done serious damage, that will move more of that middle. So I think really what we're looking at from both sides is that there's a very small number of people in America who are going to decide this next election. And, they're the ones who, if they understand all of these different charges, the business fraud charges, the sex charges, these espionage charges, they can make the difference.
So and that's a great point. I think you have to look at this in its totality. We haven't gotten there's so much to talk about that we didn't even get to these two aspects. But this is the second time that he has faced legal charges in the last 3 months. There's the New York case and now this case, and there's two more pending. And so you wonder, okay, will any one of these do damage to his hopes to be the nominee for the Republican nomination for president? Or will it not? Or will it be the totality of all of that? That you're not charged once, you're not charged twice. We don't know what the other two are going to bring, but let's say they do bring charges. No, you're facing charges on 4 different pretty bad things.
Yeah. Be mindful of the fact that I believe there was a memo from the Fulton County DA that was sent to the administrative judge indicating that they perhaps should address security issues and maybe clear some of their calendars towards the end of June. So I would anticipate, something happening towards the end of June in Fulton County. There's one difference here. There's one difference between what we're seeing happening with this indictment, what we've seen happen with the multiple count, 34 count indictment out of New York City. These cases involve his liberty. They're not cases that are civil in nature, where we're talking about punitive damages and we're talking about money. We're talking about his liberty. They're going to fight like heck in order to prevent a conviction. You're going to see a lot of smoke and mirrors. I hate to use that word right now, considering the air quality that we're all experiencing. But you're going to see a lot of that taking place in our court system in the next several weeks. And once again, you're going to see our courts hold up. And understand that the criminal practice is different than the civil practice. So you're not going to have a lot of time that's going to be you can't manipulate the criminal practice like you can with the constant
But
lead
some
for
of
appeal.
some of these cases may go past the 2024 election, though, right? Because there's a window in which if he can't do it, right? So, but I mean, you have the documents case, you have the Justice Department probe of January 6th, right? Mm-hmm. Georgia election fraud, and then the Manhattan DA, the hush money case. Right? Yes. The question is this? For Republicans, you've begun to hear the chatter about this exhaustion, right? The country is exhausted by the chaos. We need to look forward, not look back. And I think the key thing is where will leading Republicans, but the real thing is where will the Republican money go, right? Where are the big dollar donors? Are they going to say, listen, we can't go through this for the next 2 years. There's a lot of big issues on the table right now. We got through the debt limit, but there's more costly implications to that. On the horizon is the budget stuff. There's just too much chaos. It's too costly. The problems are too big. We can't continue. The question is, where will the big money go? And if he's just relying on small donors, is that enough? Because he's generating tons of money with small donors.
So I want to pick up on something Theresa said and something Jim mentioned, and that is talking about where's the big money going to go, and how is that going to affect the small number of swing voters that are going to determine this? So if you look at if you think of voters having two interests, social policy and economic policy, Republicans appeal to voters who are socially conservative and fiscally conservative, right? Slam dunk. They're going to vote Republican no matter who the candidate is. Democrats, fiscally liberal, socially liberal, right? Those are the bases. So the swing voters are the ones who are socially liberal but fiscally conservative. Those are very few in number. It's the people the swing voters primarily fall into the basket that are fiscally liberal and socially conservative. And that's what Trump was, right? You have this populist economic message. We're going to bring back manufacturing jobs. We're going to, spend money to, tax cuts and blah, 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 blah. But he didn't
do it.
No, I understand that. But that's the message, and that's what appeals to voters. So unless Democrats become socially conservative on issues, I think those swing voters, that really important sliver of people who are socially conservative and more fiscally liberal, are going to be the ones who decide the election. So unless Democrats become, pro-life and anti-gay marriage, they're going to have a very tough time appealing to those swing voters. So I think whether it's Trump or whether it's one of the other people from the Republican primary clown car, I think they're going to vote for them, period.
I mean, the key is in the primary, the Republican primary. But the question is, will it make a difference that you have Asa Hutchinson saying he's a loser? You have now Pence beginning to talk negatively about him. You have, Pence saying you've got to choose between democracy and Trump, because he said that's the question. Will it make a difference if Chris Christie's going hard at him? I don't know. Because there's no obvious other alternative. But I do think it will be interesting to see where the big Republican money went.
I think the landscape right now, as it is going to be very different. The landscape then is going to be a lot different than it is right now. I think what you're going to look and find, Aaron, is someone is doing an analysis right now on where those votes are, right? And they're going to start targeting a lot of these buses and a lot of these flights, right, with our vulnerable migrants. They're going to be targeting those communities, right? So to sort of, stir the pot and really challenge the otherwise what I would say would be independent voters who may be liberal in social policies. And would possibly, vote for Democrats under different circumstances. But I anticipate that we're going to see more buses, more airplanes that are going to be specifically targeting.
And transgender legislation. They have their, which is just disgusting. But in any case, they're just the Republicans on that issue.
So I think that what will really become part of this issue is you already see some of the opposition in the people running starting to say electability.
Right.
And I think if this stuff masses to the point where somebody with enough credibility, it could be Christie, could be one of the others, comes out and not says Trump is bad, Trump did this stuff, said, we don't see him getting elected. You see me getting elected. I can take Biden out. That's, I think, going to be the only thing that could defeat Trump. And it would have, there's still going to be 30% of his party who's behind him. So it's really only if someone can really make a compelling case in the primaries to that electability story.
I haven't seen the candidate thus far that I think can achieve that. Now,
Yep.
Everyone thinks that Tim Scott has a lane as being this, sort of the sober candidate within the Republican Party with a great story that can appeal to an independent base. I see him on a stage with a Donald Trump being devoured, right? Yeah. DeSantis is a bona fide fool, but in terms of his issues and what, taking on the cultural grievances, for him, I think that's a winner for him, but he goes farther right than even Trump. And I don't know that you could be successful nationally by going farther right. And he doesn't seem to, I think there have been opportunities for him to pivot, in some issues where he could probably do better, but refuses to do so. I don't think that his campaign is nimble enough, right? At the end of the day, I just don't see Christie. Christie, if you paint him with a, the Rhino label, and you say, "Oh, you're, in Jersey, you're a Democrat." I see that being very effective against him. But Trump as the candidate, Biden is assured another term, and I think that's what's going to happen.
All right, let's go back to the letters here, and Jim's knocking on wood, or whatever this is.
From your mouth to somebody's ears.
It ain't
I
wood.
don't want to test that.
Sando says, "Gentlepersons, please explain how our democratic form of government can continue to exist if a single, not too brilliant person like Donald Trump can attain our highest office and then literally almost tear that same government apart. Other individuals exist and may someday attain the presidency and succeed where hopefully Trump has failed, assuming he doesn't win the next presidential election. If he were to win the upcoming presidential election, then goodbye, USA. It'll be all over for this great experiment."
I disagree. Trump is a genius in terms of how he markets himself, how he plays voters. He was able to do far more damage than the past 40 years of Republican administrations. Yep. And he's figured out how, there are legal consequences for it, as we've been discussing. I'm not saying this is legal, but he has been able to just change the ideology, the level of discourse, what's acceptable to say, what's acceptable to do, in terms of Republicans have been trying to weaken governmental institutions since Nixon.
Mm-hmm. But
and Trump has been more successful than all of them combined. Yeah. Sure, Reagan had this tax cut here. He made more stringent requirements to get, food stamps and welfare. Those are important objectives of the Republican Party in terms of rolling back a lot of the New Deal Great Society programs. But Trump has figured out a way to do that on steroids and make it appeal to the public by saying, the Department of Justice is just engaged in a witch hunt. I'm always the victim. That appeals to voters. And the fact that he was able to tap that vein and go from an unsuccessful businessman to a president is a level of genius that you really don't see in American politics.
But that was built on a base of a lot of other people doing a lot of work on that. The Federalist Society, the Cambridge Analytica, the Mercer money. The Mercer money, they created these sort of fake not-for-profits, and they went after Hillary Clinton for 15, 20 years with books and quote-unquote documentaries and such, right? There was a build-up to this, and those groups found their candidate. They found the one person who was a master at marketing and who didn't care. right?
Yeah.
About the
And that's the
consequences of his
genius of it.
actions.
Yeah, but I would agree with that. I would agree with everything you've just said. But I also think there was an organic. There was just an organic culture of grievance that existed in this country.
Well, I think there's an economic angle. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no.
Despair
Yes.
because of the deeper divide between the haves and the have-nots. It's just growing and growing. You know better than me on this.
Yep.
And I think they tapped into that despair, which is a result of the weakening, the loss of the middle class.
When you see organized labor, right, traditional, dependable Democrat support, and organized labor wearing Trump material because they agree philosophically with the impolite things that he was saying that most politicians who care about their reputations would never say. Yeah, he came in and in his con man-like fashion, ripped that bandage off, right, and exposed it. And I think we'll be dealing with the consequences of that for years.
Letters?
Yes, we do have more letters. We have about 2 minutes before we have to go over to a break. Marion says Trump's motives are always worse than the worst thing we can imagine. What if he's selling the documents for money and election help, blackmail, and power? The wives of our intelligence people will be damned. And what have I not been able to imagine? Then there is this from Jeff. As much as it pains me to say this, it doesn't matter how many times Trump is brought to trial. He always manages to weasel out of his crimes. He has a lifetime of experience and will do it again now. Plus, his base does not care that he's a criminal and a con man of the highest order. They continue to open their wallets and support his view of the world, which is a sad state of affairs for our country. I understand that this is of interest and great importance, but in the end, it won't amount to a hill of beans. That from Jeff. Then we go to Dom, who says, I would appreciate a refrain of the use of the derogatory term like redneck on such a great show and station. I don't think
someone wrote it.
It was a letter writer.
That,
Yeah, it was a letter writer that
Yeah,
used it. We didn't, but it was from a letter writer that it was making a point. So, but Dom, thank you.
You're correct, Dom.
Let's see. Mary says, I just read that Trump appointed U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon has been assigned to handle Trump's case. She's the same judge who threw roadblocks in front of the initial investigation. What gives? Do we know about that?
No.
Yeah, I did.
There was a rumor that it was going to go to Cannon.
There's a rumor just because of the fact that we're back in Florida, and we're going to look for the most ill-equipped judge to administer to this. I don't believe that you would have a Department of Justice special prosecutor going through the lengths that they've gone to then not account for that, right? So that would be a rumor, a bad rumor at that.
We go to Paul. Years from now, if it's discovered that Trump was indeed a stooge for Putin, these charges under the Espionage Act will seem terribly appropriate. My theory has been that Trump kept the documents to try and relieve himself of the leverage that Putin has on him and was trying to get dirt on anybody to relieve his burden. We'll be right back. Good morning. Welcome back to the Roundtable and to our panel discussion. Jim Hendler, Aaron Pacitti, David Soares, and Theresa Bourgeois making up our group. We've spent most of the program talking about the Trump indictment, and obviously over the next several days and next week, and certainly on Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll be talking about it a lot more. In our final 15 minutes, I would like to talk about other cheery topics, like the debt limit and a borrowing binge, as the New York Times calls it. A $1 trillion borrowing binge looms after debt limit standoff. The government has avoided default, but the effects of the debt ceiling brinkmanship may still ripple across the economy. So the cure could be the problem.
No. That's so the last time I was on, which was before the X date of June 5th, was that whether this if this doesn't get resolved, it'll be a global catastrophe. If it does get resolved, there's going to be this grinding pain that results in the U.S. economy because of this brinkmanship. And now we're starting to see what this is as the Treasury Department announces their plans. So as the Treasury Department ran down its cash balances with all of these emergency measures.
So not catastrophe, just near catastrophe.
Near catastrophe, yeah.
Okay, well, that makes me feel better. That's It's Marvin the Martian at the end of Duck Dodgers of just holding on to that little piece.
So the Treasury Department ran their cash balances down to near zero, and that's the money they used to pay Social Security recipients, Medicare, Medicaid, veteran salaries, Department of Defense, everything. And again, that's money that Congress authorized them to spend earlier that year. So when the Treasury Department ran their cash balances down to near zero, now they need to make up for all of the spending that they need to do as a matter of course. So what they need to do, because they were forced into this position by congressional Republicans, and it's important to note that this is not a bipartisan issue, this is a manufactured crisis by congressional Republicans, is that they need to raise $1 trillion by September to continue making the payments that Congress has authorized and promised that they would make.
Isn't that what they do in the fund drive here? Just make trillions of dollars?
Yes.
We just bring Alan over there.
Secretary of Treasury.
That's right.
Alan
It's
Shorttalk.
Trillions of dollars that we've made. That's right.
So
Would take them 2 weeks.
not to get too much in the weeds here, but when the Treasury Department needs to borrow money to spend on programs it has promised to spend on, they issue government bonds. So the Treasury Department sells a bond to the public loans the government money, cash that the Treasury Department can spend, and then the public can cash in the bond at a later date. But the Treasury Department, because they haven't been able to do that for, the first half of 2023, now needs to do it en masse. So to make those bonds attractive to investors, the Treasury Department is going to have to promise slightly higher interest rates on the bonds they issue. So when yields on U.S. government bonds go up, interest rates economy-wide follow suit. So because of this, consumers are going to face higher borrowing costs if they want to take out a mortgage, if they want to buy a new car, on their credit card bills, on student loans. Businesses are going to face higher interest rates on corporate loans and small business loans. That's going to have a contractionary force on U.S. economic growth. Higher interest rates is going to put those regional banks that were in a borderline crisis mode in March in increasingly perilous straits, because as interest rates go up, it jeopardizes their balance sheet, making them more prone to the runs that we saw with Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and all of the other ones.
It's depressing, man. This is really depressing, bro.
This is the point.
This is why we have to be focusing on this stuff, not Trump's legal.
The point is that
yesterday the bear market.
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
it became we had the best day the stock market's had.
Yeah, and so markets were cheering that, yes, we got over the debt ceiling hump. This is great. Now the rubber hits the road, and you're going to see interest rates creep up slowly. So that means anytime a household or business wants to borrow money, it's going to be more expensive. That depresses economic activity at a very critical point where the U.S. economy is, I don't want to say near catastrophe, but let's say near recession. So congressional Republicans have, again, put the U.S. economy at risk, and now it's legitimately at risk, even though the debt ceiling has been passed. This all could have been avoided if, politicians just agreed to eliminate the debt ceiling or raise it as a matter of course. The brinkmanship that Republicans showed is not just theater. This has real impacts, and we're going to be feeling it over the next couple months. So the fact that it was resolved doesn't mean there won't be negative consequences. They will start rolling out over the next 3 months. So kind of circling back to what I said with higher interest rate costs, buying a $200 shot of whiskey, on credit, you could argue might not be the best financial choice in an era of higher interest rates.
It was my debit card, not credit.
Okay, there you go. fiscally responsible Joe.
No, immediately it was immediately
so bad.
immediately have impacted the bottom line.
Circling back to where we began with one more dig at Joe. But the thing is, the debt limit crisis, that phase of it is over. But the next round is equally troubling for our economy and for average folks, kitchen table issues. Because now you have that ultra-conservative Freedom Caucus who are upset with McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy. So the Republicans were supposed to pass a number of bills this week. Against gas, saying we're going to save your gas stoves and trying to what they call the RAINS Act, which is trying to make it harder for regulatory activity to go on, the regular business of government to go on. And they could not, this is a little wonky, but they could not pass the rule that would allow these bills to go to the House floor. Now, these were never going to be signed into law, but these were what they call messaging bills. But the conservative Republicans, they're so angry with the debt limit vote that 12 of them blocked passage of the rules that would allow McCarthy to bring bills to the floor. He had to recess the House for the week, send everybody home. Now, why is this a problem? Because it really bodes ominously for the budget bills, the appropriations bills that need to go through the process and get passed. Because in that debt limit agreement, there's a trigger that says if you don't pass them by the end of the year, then there's automatic cuts. And how is McCarthy has a choice now? Is he going to try to align with these ultra-conservatives and bring them back in? Or is he going to start aligning with Democrats?
He's got to align with the Democrats.
This is going to roil the markets again because we got past the debt limit crisis, but now we're on the verge of a new budget crisis.
And so I believe the following, that the Republicans will be doing everything they can to make sure that this hits in early 2024 and into the summer.
Right.
Because it's always the sitting president who gets blamed for these things no matter what. And
Now,
I think that's going to be their strategy, is to have their internal fights now. They're going to have their internal fights now, but saving the economy to them is much less important than a Republican getting elected.
We have less than 5 minutes, but we've been talking mostly about Donald Trump. We've been talking all about Donald Trump, but I would like to just talk about real quick, going back even in looking at the indictment. Joe Biden, the best political avenue here is just keep your mouth shut, right?
Don't say a thing.
Yeah.
About that, but keep doing what you're doing. They need to go out and be talking about all the new building with the infrastructure bill. They need to be going out talking about, with all the smoke, all of the work that they're doing on clean energy. They need to be, focusing on those issues. They got historic legislative wins. Now they have to go out and sell those historic legislative wins. But he has not talked about the Justice Department so far.
And he shouldn't.
And he shouldn't.
The thing that you were talking about, the subject that you were talking about earlier,
keep him away from sandbags.
Stop.
We are going to.
Stop.
He has to lean on Hakeem Jeffries now,
Right.
to engage more with the Republican leadership that wants to actually work and wants to avoid all of these
Well, we'll
issues.
see which direction they go in. And, there are also some really important House races. The House is going to keep trying to force these votes that are difficult for Democrats, and they're messaging that they're never going to, like the take away your gas stove. The Democrats are not trying to take away your gas stoves. If anybody looked at the details, what Elise Stefanik said in her press conference, it just wasn't true. But it sounds good, right? But I think the problem with Trump and this indictment, and which has been the problem all along, is there's all this focus on him and his legal problems. At the same time, the country, we are in the midst of 15 million people, mostly children and elders in nursing homes, getting kicked off Medicaid, and mostly for paperwork errors. 15 million
That's
people
insane.
without health insurance, right? So that's bad for them personally. But if you don't have health insurance, you're still going to get sick. So then then there's economic impacts of that, because then you're going to get your health care in the most expensive place for taxpayers, which is you're going to go into the emergency room, which is already not working. This is a chaotic problem that's looming. We have smoke everywhere, right?
You need serious people to get serious issues, serious bills done.
Right.
And you have an unserious group of people right now that basically, you said Elise Stefanik, I don't know what the line was that you mentioned earlier, Joe.
Well, they were saying that the writer Ruth Marcus was saying that Elise Stefanik said this, and she at one point she knew better.
Yeah, but the Elise Stefanik who knew better made a calculated decision to become this one, because the rewards for this version of her are much more than the rewards that are out there for the more sensible version.
Right.
And she's not the only one, obviously.
But gun violence. We were talking about gun violence.
We gotta wrap up. I'm sorry.
We need to focus.